All right, joining me now, as promised, Diane, former Assistant Secretary of Education under President George H.W. Bush, author of The Death and Life of the Great American School System, How Testing and Choice Are Undermining Education, and Meryl, Chancellor of the New York State Board of Regents, the top education official in the state of New York, overseeing those standardized tests today. Let me start with you, Ms. Tisch. When you see the reports of the opting out, the numbers from West Seneca, which are pretty striking, I gotta say, is your reaction people are crazy, or is your reaction we're doing something wrong?
My reaction is obviously not that people are crazy. I think people should act in what they perceive to be the best interests of their children. And perhaps, from our perspective, we have not been clear enough in describing the intent of the test. The intent of the test is to give a snapshot of performance and allow parents to know where their children are at any given point in their educational career as compared to their peers. If you talk about income inequality in this country, income inequality is directly tied to the achievement gap for our poor students. Those students, if they are not given access and opportunity to high quality education, they simply cannot move along the continuum.
Okay. There's a whole, let's sort of bracket for a question, the sort of sociology of poverty for a moment, right? No, because I mean, we could go around. There's a lot of things I could contest about whether that link, in what direction the causation of that link flows, right? But so here's the question to you, Ms. Ravitch, is I had someone who works in education, who I respect, compare testing opt-out to people opting out of immunization. Because basically it was like, look, yeah, your kid is probably not going to get measles, and like if you think there's some downside, you can opt out, but then you're just a free rider, because the policy as a whole is a necessary means of figuring out where people are, assessing, right? When you need this data, if you start allowing people to opt out, you just destroy the entire data set. Like, what are they going to do in West Seneca to judge anything year over year when one year they've got numbers and the next year they don't have any data?
It's totally inappropriate to compare opting out of testing to opting out of immunization. One has a scientific basis, the other has none. The tests that kids take today have nothing to do with the tests that we took when we were kids. When we were kids, we took an hour test to see how we did in reading, an hour test to see how we did in math. Children today in third grade are taking 8 hours of testing. They're spending more time taking tests than people taking the bar exam. Now, when we talk about the results of the test, they come back 4 to 6 months later. The kids already have a different teacher, and all they get is a score and a ranking. The teachers can't see the item analysis. They can't see what the kids got wrong. They're getting no instructional gain, no possibility of improvement for the kids because there's no value to the test. They have no diagnostic value. If you go to a doctor and you say, I have a pain, and the doctor says, I'll get back to you in 6 months, and then he gets back to you and tells you how you compare to everyone else in the state, but he doesn't have any medicine for you.
Respond to that.
Well, I would say that the tests are really a diagnostic tool that is used to inform instruction and curriculum development throughout the state. New York State spends $54 billion a year on educating 3.2 million school children. For $54 billion a year, I think New Yorkers deserve a snapshot of how our kids are doing, how our schools are doing, how our systems are doing. There's a really important data point.
Wait, well, let me just say this, though. I just want to point out something. That was interestingly non-responsive to what she said, right? She's saying this does not work as diagnostic tool for the child or the teacher. You're saying this is a diagnostic tool for the taxpayer who's funding the system to see if the system's working, right? Those are distinct.
No, let me finish, because we're talking about what happens when parents opt out and what the system can then report back to parents and to the state. The point of the matter is, 2 weeks ago I was with my grandson at a pediatric visit. There was a new mother sitting next to me, and she was comparing growth charts for her 4-month-old son. She wanted to know how he was going to do on a continuum.
Right.
It is natural for parents to want to know how their kids are doing. And as for the diagnostic nature of these tests and the amount of information that is gleaned from them, school districts report to us all the time that they design curriculum around the results of these tests. I agree with Diane. There is no such thing as a perfect test. Absolutely not. But the ability to glean information from these tests and use them in very direct ways to inform instruction and curriculum in classrooms is actually really important.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Is the here one of conception or execution, which is to say, is it that the entire model of essentially that we have here, right, which is us aligning the curriculum with these standards, testing to see if the children can meet these standards, and then using that as a sort of accountability device, that model is flawed, or the actual implementation and the testing itself is flawed?
The model is flawed. You will not find any prep school, any private school in the state of New York or in any state that uses this model. They trust teachers to
But
judge
they have such a
their
different
students.
student body. I mean, isn't that
doesn't
apples
matter.
and oranges?
No, it doesn't matter. You're not helping poor kids when you put so much emphasis on the test that they lose the arts, they lose physical education, they lose recess, and they lose almost everything except test prep, and they spend months doing test
So
prep.
this is an important point, though. I just want to. This is not about what is in that test. This is about emphasis on the test.
The model is wrong. We are the most over-tested nation in the world. If you look at the top 10 high-performing nations in the world, they do not test every child every year. They test them at the end of 6th grade. Canada tests kids in the 3rd grade and the 6th grade.
Okay.
Nobody tests kids every year.
Let me ask you this. You have an opportunity to speak to parents who might be watching this. What do you want to tell them about testing?
I would like to say that tomorrow is the second day of testing, and I would